Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite books that I read in all of 2019. These are all ones that I just loved with all of my heart. I read 109 books in 2019 and I have 10 here that I think are the best of the ones that I read. And it's definitely very interesting to look at my top 10 books as a collective and compare it to other years. In 2018, my favorites list was very heavy with adult fantasy, and this year there is a genre that kind of took over, and that is horror. I had a really great year reading horror, and 5 of these are horror books. A lot of them you will probably be able to guess if you are a frequent watcher of my channel, but a couple of them I think are gonna be curveballs. I don't think you guys are gonna be expecting a few of these. There's at least one of them that I know I've only talked about once, and that was a long time ago. So let's just get into it. There's really no order to these. I'm having a hard time deciding what is my absolute favorite just because they're all so different, but I'm just gonna go through the stack that I have. The first one is The Girl in Red by Christina Henry. This is a Little Red Riding Hood horror post-apocalyptic retelling about a girl named Red. There was a widespread virus that went around and killed a bunch of people, and the world kind of went to shit. People are murdering and looting, and it's not safe. So she sets out on a journey to go to her grandmother's house, and along the way she comes across a lot of obstacles. The book is told in 2 different timelines. One is the past, when she first sets out on her journey with her brother, and then the second is after something happened. She's no longer with her brother, she's all alone, and she has to finish the journey by herself. And so as you're going through, you're trying to figure out like what it was that happened to her brother, why is she alone now, what is going on in the world. There is this virus going on, but there's also something mysterious happening as well. And I just loved this. I have never connected to a character so much as I did with Red. I felt like I could really understand her, and her choices and her motivations just made so much sense to me. She's the type of person who has been preparing for an apocalypse situation for a long time. She watches all the movies and all the TV shows and had like a survival plan. And she is like the person who is not here for the dumb decisions that people make in horror movies or horror books. And I also love that her weapon of choice is an axe. The very opening scene is her killing this guy with her axe, and it's just like one of the best opening scenes of any book I've ever read. I'm the type of person who really loves standalones. I love when a book can tell its whole story in one, but this is one of those standalones that I would love to have another book. I would love to follow Red's journey more. I would love to see more about what is happening in this world. This was just such a good book. I definitely think it's one of the top post-apocalyptic books I've ever read. The next book is The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. I've talked about this nonstop on my channel. This is a sci-fi horror about this woman who takes a job as a cave diver. So she's going off planet and mining in these caves, and it's not until she gets to the cave that she realizes that she was kind of deceived about the nature of the job. She thought she would have a whole team of people with her, but it turns out she's the only one there. She thought that it was an exploration mission, but it turns out it's not, it's something else. The only person that she's in communication with is her handler via an earpiece, and her handler is just being hella sketchy. And there's some sort of like creature or monster in the cave that wants to kill her, and there's a lot of secrets and mystery. This is a very ambitious book because there are only 2 characters and there's one very isolated setting, but it is just done so well. It's a very slow-paced book, and it's definitely more focused on character development and building suspense. A lot of the horror elements come from the setting and the claustrophobia, and I think it is done really well. This is the type of horror that isn't outright scary, but it just keeps building suspense to the point where it's terrifying. This also has a little bit of a female-female relationship between the 2 main characters, and I just really enjoyed seeing the development that the 2 characters went through from where they started in the book versus where they were at the end. This is one of those books that could have gone really wrong, and for me it just totally worked, and I really loved it. Okay, switching gears a little bit, this book I think might surprise you. Autobiography by Christina Lauren. I read this book back in, I think, February. It's been a long time and I don't think I've mentioned it since I read it, but I loved this book so much. It definitely has stuck with me. This is a YA contemporary romance about this boy who recently moved with his family from California to Utah, and he had been out of the closet. He is bisexual, but in moving to Utah to a kind of conservative area, he kind of had to go back into the closet. He enters this writing seminar, and while he's in the seminar, he meets one of the mentors. They really hit it off. They have an attraction to each other and a romance, but there are a lot of obstacles for them because the mentor is Mormon, and so he is not out of the closet. And I thought that this book handled the topic of religion and sexuality really, really well, and I just loved the romance between the two main characters so much. I think this book also did a really good job at being light and fun, but also tackling very heavy and serious topics and being pretty emotional at times. It is honestly just such a beautiful book. If you're looking for an incredible male-male romance, I highly, highly recommend this one. I have read 5 or 6 Christina Lauren books, and this is without a doubt my #1 favorite. It is the only YA one, but I just think that they hit the ball out of the park with this one. It is incredible. I would love to see them tackle an adult male-male romance because this one was just so incredible. So the next one is The Monster of Ellen Haven by Jennifer Guisbridge. This is a dark fantasy novella that takes place in kind of this grim, dark world, and it is a tale of revenge. It follows a sorcerer and a somewhat monster character as they are setting out for this quest of vengeance against some of these citizens of neighboring towns. And while they are on this quest for vengeance, they have a romance with each other. I loved this so much more than I thought I would. So it is another male-male romance. I loved this so much because it was like the perfect mix of dark and brutal, but also hilariously funny. I love novellas so much. I know that a lot of times with novellas, criticism tends to be that people wish it was longer or that it wasn't enough to flesh out the story. I think it is a skill to be able to write something that is short, packs a punch, and crafts this story that leaves people wanting more. I think that a mark of a good novella is something that does leave people wanting more. I could read so many more stories in this world, but I thought that this was really well done. I loved the characters so much, and this has definitely become an author that I am looking to for whatever they write next. The next book is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. You guys know I've been championing this book since I got an arc of it back in March. I loved this book so much. This is a YA horror. Hi. Did you just wake up? Aww. This is a YA horror that takes place at this boarding school on an island that has been quarantined. There is this virus that is spread, and the girls at the school have all been developing different mutations. Some of them are growing extra bones, some of them have scales. There's just a wide range of body horror things that have happened to them. So because of that, the school was quarantined, and it's kind of turned into like this wild community almost. And the book follows these 3 friends when one of them goes missing and the other 2 are trying to figure out what happened to her and where she went. Now, here's the thing. I will defend this book forever and ever and ever. The main criticism of this book is the ending. I don't know. I loved the ending so much. I think it's a very typical way to end a horror book. And I literally just reread the ending to see like, okay, maybe I missed something. Maybe I can figure out why people don't like this. I still don't understand. Because I love the ending. There is no other way that I would have wanted this to end. So I'm gonna defend this book forever because I think it is great, but it is definitely a polarizing book because of the ending. I think that this was such an incredible YA horror. Just with the YA horror that I have read, a lot of times I've noticed that the authors don't go there. They kind of go up to the line of like what is acceptable and they stay there. Rory Power doesn't care. She went there. She went places I didn't think you would go, and she did it, and and I loved it. This also hands down gets the best cover award for 2019. I love this cover. Every time I see it, I'm just like blown away again. This book is eerie and dark and creepy, and do keep in mind that a big aspect of it revolves around body horror, so if that is an issue for you, proceed with caution. It is pretty gory. The next book was such a shock for me. I really had lowered my expectations for this book pretty much as far down as my expectations could get, and that book is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. I feel like I've had a very wild journey with Renee Ahdieh. The Wrath of the Dawn was one of the worst books I've ever read. Sorry. And because of that, I haven't tried to read any of her other books, but this just sounded so much up my alley, I had to try. And if you haven't seen it already, I have an entire vlog of me reading this book and sharing all of my thoughts. It's a wild ride with how I felt about this, and I'm shocked to say this is one of my favorite books of the year. So this follows a girl named Celine who is forced to flee Paris. She was a dressmaker and something happened that is causing her to have to run away. So she makes the journey to America and ends up in New Orleans, and she is being given a residence at a convent. And while she's there, she kind of gets swept up by this kind of underground society called the Court of the Lions, and she becomes wrapped up with the society's leader, Sebastian, who comes from a very influential family in New Orleans. There's a lot of secrets about him and his family and this society that he is a part of. And there's also a serial killer on the loose. Girls keep being found dead, and Celine becomes the prime target of this serial killer. Now, I talked about this in that video, so definitely go watch that. This is largely known to be a vampire book. I would not say to go into this expecting a vampire book. There are vampires, but this is more of a dark historical secret society murder mystery. It is much more that than like a vampire paranormal romance, which is what I think a lot of people were expecting. It's what I was expecting, and I think that's where a lot of the disappointment around this book is coming from. Now, fortunately for me, I much prefer a dark historical secret society book to a vampire book. I loved the romance in this. I feel like lately I've been struggling a lot with the YA fantasy romances. This gave me everything that I wanted. It reminded me of YA romances from like 2015, 2016. To me, that was peak YA romance, okay? I loved the YA romances from that time, and since then I haven't really, other than like The Cruel Prince, okay, I haven't really been able to find ones that I love as much as from that time. And this definitely reminded me of those romances. It was definitely a slow burn, which I really liked. Everything about this worked for me. It was kind of a slower book, and it took a lot of time for the plot to build, but I like books like that. I definitely know that's not everyone's cup of tea, and I could see why some people wouldn't like this or think it's too slow, but I enjoy that. I like when the plot slowly unravels as opposed to just being like snap, snap, quick. And I cannot wait for the next book. It's definitely one of my most anticipated books of 2020. I just cannot wait to see where this goes. The next book is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is a thriller, mystery, literary, I genuinely don't know like what genre to classify this book as. I guess thriller mystery. This is about a man who has recently been released from prison, and he's finally ready to tell the story of what actually happened to land him in prison. So we flash back to, I think like 10 years prior, where he is attending a school for Shakespearean actors, and it is about his play troupe. One of them was murdered, and he was the one that was found guilty. I loved this so much. Books inspired by Shakespeare is definitely one of my favorite like niche genres, which is strange because I'm not like the biggest Shakespeare fan. I don't love Shakespeare's plays in their original form, but I love things that take those ideas or take those stories and change them. For some reason, I just really love that. And this book was probably one of the best I've ever read that did that. And it makes sense because the author has a master's in Shakespeare studies. So she definitely knows what she's doing. She knows the material, and she used it so well, because not only are these Shakespearean actors, but the book is split up into different acts. And in each act, the actors are performing a play at their school, and the play that they perform very closely mirrors the actual plot that is happening in that act. It is so brilliant. I don't know how the author did it, but it is like so fascinating to watch as these crazy things are happening and then the actors are performing this play, and the lines that they're saying are just like, they fit into the actual plot of the book so well. Pretty much all the characters in this book are despicable. They're all bad people and all of them seem guilty. All of them could potentially be the murderer. I loved this book so much. It worked so well for me. The next book is Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. This is a YA horror. Every time I talk about this book, it's very hard for me to explain because it's just so weird. I'm gonna read like the little short blurb for it. It says, once a year a road appears in the forest, and at the end of it the ghost of Lucy Gallows beckons. Lucy's game isn't for the faint of heart. If you win, you escape with your life, but if you lose ... So in this town there is this old like urban legend about this girl named Lucy Gallows who went missing. Supposedly every year this road in the forest opens and anyone who goes onto the road goes missing. So the main character, her sister, was one of the people who had gone missing, and so this year when the road opens, she sets out on a mission with her friends to travel on it to go find her sister. So they enter the road and it turns out to be this really messed up game where there are different gates that kind of act as level checkpoints. There are a lot of rules that if you break, you're gonna end up dying or being trapped on the road forever. The only way to escape is to follow the rules and make it to the end of the road. But the road is kind of like a sentient thing. It doesn't actually want you to get to the end, so there's a lot of obstacles and tricks that it throws at the characters. This book was just so good. And the way that it's told is after the fact. So it's in an interview. There's these people interviewing the main character, asking about what happened. The main character is telling the story of what happened on the road, and there's a lot of things added in, like photographs and videotape, like different things as evidence. And yeah, like I said, this book is so bizarre. The things that happen, I don't even know how to begin to explain. I love horror movies that revolve around some sort of game that the characters have to win or they die. And this really played up on that concept, and I think it did it really well. And this is definitely one of those books that it's hard to explain. I mentioned the road is trying to trick the characters so that they don't actually make it to the end. There's also things in the book that are trying to trick you as a reader, and like you just have to pay close attention to the things that are happening or the things that aren't happening. There were a couple times when I was like, wait, what? And I had to go back and like see where something went wrong. This book was just so good. I think about it all the time. So the next book is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book follows Daisy Jones and the Six. It takes place in the 60s and it follows Daisy Jones, who is a famous singer, and then the Six, who is also a famous band, and they end up collaborating together on music and they become really popular. They like rise to crazy fame, and then the band breaks up mysteriously and nobody knows why. This book is told as like a documentary and interviewing everyone now. This was hands down the best audiobook I read in 2019, or that I listened to in 2019. It was so great. It has a full cast, and because this is told as like a documentary, it's like an interview style. It's a full cast. All the characters have a different narrator. The production is so amazing. This was one of those books that kind of snuck up on me. I wasn't really enjoying it in the beginning, and then all of a sudden I cared so much about the characters. I cared so much about Daisy, and I was so invested in finding out what happened. I think that Taylor Jenkins Reid has this incredible ability to make characters feel like real people. And my last favorite book of the year was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This is a very strange book. It basically follows these two opposing time-traveling assassins who kind of have like a cat and mouse type of relationship. Their missions always counteract each other. They're basically traveling through time, trying to outdo one another, and they start up a pen pal relationship. Their letters start as kind of antagonistic very much like bragging if one of them beat the other at a mission, or baiting each other into doing things. And slowly, as they're writing letters back and forth, they build this bond and deep relationship that turns into admiration and then eventually love. This book is just so beautiful. It's definitely a book I recommend physically reading as opposed to listening to the audiobook, because the prose are just so beautiful. If I had to pick one book on this list that might be my #1 favorite, I feel like this is gonna be it. It's hard for me to know right away because my favorite books, to me, I classify my favorite books as ones that I think about for years and years and years. Whereas there might be one book that I read that at the time I loved it so much, but over the years I kind of forget about it or I don't think about it as much. But the books that I'm just constantly thinking about, constantly being reminded of, those are the ones that end up being my favorites. And I feel like this is gonna be one of those books. I kind of pitched this book as Killing Eve if they're time traveling pen pals. To me, that's what it was. It gave me so much Killing Eve vibes, and I just loved it so much. So those were my favorite books of 2019. I hope if you end up reading any of these because of this video, I hope you really enjoy them. I cannot wait to read all the books in 2020 and find some new favorites. I have a lot of like early 2020 videos planned, so definitely keep an eye out on my channel for a lot of new content. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!